welcome to our Main Street 101 video series. I would like to introduce Mary Helmer Wirth, who is with Main Street, Alabama, and she's going to talk to you guys about action planning, alignment, and transformation strategies. Thank you very much, Mary. Take it away.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. It's always good to talk to my Midwest friends. So if you don't know me well, I actually was Main Street coordinator in Kansas, was a local Main Street director in Kansas for many years. So I have a special place in my heart for any Midwest folks. So I'm happy to do this for y'all. So when we talk about action planning, it's important to get everybody understanding that each of the 4 points can be pretty simplified. Organization is really trying to get everybody singing out of the same songbook, understanding that your district is important. And if you can get people to agree that your district is important, that is a huge part of having one goal that everybody can tie to. Promotion is about selling that image and promise of your district. It's kind of when you invite people over to your home, you clean up your living room or kitchen, depending on how you entertain, sometimes both. Downtown, your districts are really your kitchen or your living room of your city, and it needs to be party ready. So that's important. Design is getting your Main Street into top physical shape. It is the one that everybody is going to look at the visual pieces of your downtown. So design really is about the trees, the landscape, the benches, the lights, the plantings, the building facades, the whole 9 yards. And then, of course, economic vitality is finding those new purposes. We're not going to be able to take your cities back to how they were in the 1950s, and we don't want to. What we really want to be able to do is help them understand how we can find new purposes for properties and new development opportunities within the city. So what makes the Main Street approach unique? I'm a fan of these 8 guiding principles, just because it clarifies and makes things simpler. It needs to be comprehensive, so you need to be working in all 4 points as equally as you can. And it needs to be incremental. A lot of times we'll have these big goals, ideas, concepts, visions that are 5 to 6 years out, and sometimes we can't wrap our head around what do we do in year 1 to get us to year 5. Self-help, you've got to understand that you can't be looking for somebody from the outside, white knight on a charger coming in to save you. Most of your resources are going to be local. Partnerships, looking at partnerships and understanding that the district is not owned by one entity. The district should be something that everybody feels like they can have a part in. So look at those more extensive partnerships. Assets, take some time, get out, look at your district from a different perspective. Look at it from a visitor perspective. I always encourage our folks here to go 10 miles outside of your district, type in your main address in Google, and follow the map. You'll be a little surprised at what Google is telling your people to do. Now, you can, if you work hard enough, change that, but it also helps start getting you an idea of what your assets are and what you might need to be working on. Quality. One thing about Main Streeters is we are workers, and sometimes we want to throw everything at the kitchen sink, and you just don't have to do that. Take some time, throw the spaghetti against the wall, have fun with that, but pick off the pieces that you can really do and not try to do everything at once. So quality over quantity. And then change. You can't expect other people to change if you're not willing to change yourself. So really look internally as to what changes you're going to make. And then, of course, my personal favorite has always been implementation. And I think it's the thing that sets Main Street apart. We get things done. We're not make a plan, put a plan on the shelf. 3 years later, somebody says, you know what we need? We need a plan. So Main Street goes, no, you need to implement the plan. So facts of life about your downtown and district revitalization are that there are no handouts. Most of your resources are going to be local. While there are, especially with ARPA, American Recovery Plan Act, there's been a lot of federal money coming through the state. So you may have been starting to see some of that. That gravy train will end. So you need to make sure you don't lose sight of meat and potatoes while you're chasing gravy grant. Just be a little aware of that. Forge those coalitions. Look at those partnerships. What can you do to help spread the Main Street philosophy and the Main Street words and the Main Street work to other people? Create the culture and priority for renewal. It's the different way of looking. We can't do it the way we've always done it and expect a different result. And then, of course, no magic wand. One thing I always say to our folks is Main Street works 100% of the time if you work it. That is the thing to always remember. So the purpose of your action plans are really to manage that wide range of activities that have to take place in order for your program to be successful. It develops that timetable, explains the organization's purpose and activities to the public, and quantifies where you're going to go. So it's much easier to measure the effectiveness of a promotion if you have that measurability or quantifiable piece in there. Instead of saying, we want to increase sales in our district, how much do you want to increase your sales in your district? And if you're going to measure that, do you have a baseline to measure it off of? So that quantifiable part will really help you understand if your work plans are really accomplishing what you want them to accomplish. So when you're putting your action plans together, it should clarify the intentions of your revitalization effort. Articulate the mission, and we've had a lot of discussions lately in Alabama with my folks about mission statements and how they used to be this long book of, vision and then our mission and everything else. Keep it short, keep it succinct, make it easy to understand. So for instance, here in Alabama, our tagline is creating jobs and keeping character. That's pretty much our mission. Our mission is to work with our communities to maintain the character of our state and our cities and the architecture and the history while creating jobs. And it doesn't have to be a 5-paragraph statement. So try to keep it simple. It helps define the goals, the outcomes, and the activities that are going to bring that mission to life. And it holds you accountable. It's to really help educate people about what Main Street does and holds us and others accountable for what we say we're going to do. I am a person that if my name is on a plan that I need to get this part done and it's communicated to me that this is the time frame, I'm going to get her done. When you leave those plans so nebulous and open-ended that nobody really has a time frame or a true assignment, if it says committee instead of 3 or 4 people's names, it's pretty easy for that plan to just get put to the side. So be specific on that. And it does empower those volunteers and helps you have a roadmap to success. So some elements of a successful plan would be that vision and mission statement. Again, keep it succinct, keep it tight. 1 or more goals for each of the 4 points. This is one of the things when I was a local Main Street director that was a huge aha moment for me, because we know that you've got 4 committees generally. You can have up to 10 work plans in each of those committees. So you've got 40 work plans and you're starting to look at it and go, oh my gosh, I need to come up with 40 goals. No, you can set as a board, the job is for them to set the goals for the organization. 1 to 2 goals that are broad based for each committee that can easily have several work plans coming out of it. And then you have your activities that will accomplish each outcome, and then a timetable, who's doing it, who are the people, when is it going to get done, how much is it going to cost. So when you look at your transformation strategy, it should flow across all 4 points. So it's to shift the focus from process to outcomes. And it does keep organizations who've been in the program a little bit longer, if you're a more mature program, your committees need to be thinking, what's that? Vision across all 4 and less siloed. I really like the transformation strategy approach because it allows each of the four committees to work around a strategy that they're all trying to get to instead of everybody working in a silo. So let's start with a simple approach. The goals tell you why we exist. So when I'm working with our communities here, one of the things I work with them on is just understanding what each of the 4 points, their teams are supposed to be doing. Organization, in a nutshell, is about funding the program, recruiting, training, and rewarding volunteers, and public relations. Now that can fall to 14 work plans right there if you really think through it, but that is their job. And sometimes you need to spend some time going back to the teams and reminding them, in general, this is what this particular point is working on. Design is that enhancing of the visual quality of the district, design, education, advice, future growth, and incentives. Economic vitality is understanding the market, understanding who you are, always working on strengthening those existing businesses first, because no one will be recruited to a weak market. So if you're a community that has a high vacancy rate, which I came from one that was 50% vacant, no one wanted to be recruited to a 50% vacant district. We had to work with the people that were there first and help them understand how to strengthen their businesses, work with our local entrepreneurs, and then as we became more successful, those outside businesses, franchises, and those kinds of places started to come in. And then promotion is about marketing the unique characteristics of your district. And it's really setting that place for people to shop, live, work, play, and invest in your district. So I'm going to break it down a little bit and hopefully make this a little more simple. So the activity just tells you how we're going to get there. So it's a specific event or an action. So if you are saying we're going to set up teams to visit district businesses, or get copies of current codes and zoning, or we're going to determine the need for succession practices. If you have, this was always an area of concern when I was a local director, is these long-term businesses and property owners who'd been in play for 45 or 50 years. You knew there was going to come a time where that business was going to turn. And were we prepared for that? That's what I mean by succession practices. And then, a more simple one is implementing that Did You Know campaign. If you're kind of new to the Main Street world, the Did You Know campaign is kind of a fun one in that it helps put together some social media campaigns. It helps identify interesting products or services that your current businesses already offer. So it's, did you know that this particular business does this? A really nice, simple, quick way to introduce what's happening in your district. And then they have to be measurable and have those deadlines. So if you want to get more district businesses involved, tell us what that means. What way do you want to get them involved? Do you want to have them working on different events and activities? Is it your retail-oriented businesses and you want them to be involved in more of the promotional events? What does that mean? The code review and enforcement, something we're working on right now is code and zoning review. And that would fall more under design, perhaps ED, but really thinking, how can we understand what's happening in the district from a development perspective if we don't know what the code is, and we don't know what the zoning is, and we don't understand what the enforcement is. So that's a really good work plan to be thinking through. And then what are the strategies that we can use to strengthen those existing businesses? How can we take somebody who's been in business for a long time, look at the market study, look at the niches, look at the areas where they could add a product line? That's how you help those existing businesses. If you have businesses who, for instance, prior to COVID, we still had some businesses that said, I really don't need a website. And I hope that's changed, because you kind of do, where you need to have some sort of social media strategy or an outreach to people beyond coming into your storefront. Excuse me. And then that image building, perception changing, did you know activity that I already talked a little bit about. So then you get into the tasks. And these are the actual things that you have to do to complete the activity. So, who's going to be on that organization team that's going to visit district businesses to gauge their interest in Main Street? Be a team, and we're going to do this block this week, and we're going to go in and explain what Main Street is. And if you have interest in being involved in any of our teams, or these are the services we offer, it starts to break that down a little bit. That codes and zoning review, it's also a really good thing to look at other cities' best practices. You have a very, very strong coordinating program in Missouri, great team members there. Ask them, what are the best codes and zoning review practices that you've seen across the state? The amazing thing about Main Street is we're very good about sharing resources, research and development, or rip off and duplicate, whatever you want to call it. It is a very good thing that Main Streeters are always willing to share. So it's always good to look at a city that kind of has their things together, and you know that they have a good reputation as being development friendly or downtown business friendly. Find out what their codes and zoning are. It'd be a great place to start. And then how many of your business owners will be looking to sell or retire in the next 5 years? That's the one I mentioned before. we could probably sit around a table with each of your districts and you could more than likely tell me, well, I know Joe's been in the pharmacy for 30 years and he's been talking about, I mean, you know your people. So start thinking about who that's going to be. And then on the did you know activity, gathering those interesting unknown things about a current district business. We had one, we did this a long time ago when I was a local director, when we went to the cowboy shop, Jim's Cowboy Shop. It was everything you think a cowboy shop should be. You know, boots, tackle, belts, saddles, all things Western. But what they did is they also sold shoes, which resold, put new soles on the shoes. And it wasn't just boots, it was ladies' dress shoes. And I went, really? I didn't know you did that. So that was our interesting, did you know about Jim's Cowboy Shop? So we put that out there, came back to him in a month and said, have you seen any uptick? And he goes, oh my gosh, I never had any idea that there was such a business for this. We just didn't know. They had an uptick in their business by about 15% just by having that current kind of interesting unknown fact about their business. And then of course, every action plan should include evaluation as a task. So some other essential parts of your action plan should be who's responsible. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but when you're doing this, you should never have committee. You need to have names beside there. It's pretty easy if you say committee for me to say, well, I'm on the committee, but my name wasn't on that, so I'm not responsible. Put some names on there. You can put more than one name on there, but when I'm reviewing work plans for our activities here in Alabama and I see committee on it, I send it right back. Like, no, who on your committee is responsible for that? Then what's the time frame? When do you need to get it done? We are all busy people. And for me, if you don't give me a time frame, it will go to my credenza and it'll sit there for things for Mary to do eventually. And if I get around to it, I get around to it. But if it's got a time frame and it's on my calendar, I'm going to get it done. So make sure you put time frames in. Do that research on the budget. How much is it going to cost you to put together the codes and zoning? Maybe you're going to have to do some visits to other communities to see how they do that. Those are the types of budget things you need to be thinking about. And then of course the board approval. So when you assign activities, I've beat on this a little bit, more than one person can share that. It doesn't have to be just one person's name. And the Main Street executive director's name shouldn't be the only name that's on there. Other people, they can be assigned specific tasks, but they shouldn't be the only one that's assigned to it. Committee chairs and board members can be assigned specific tasks. You may have someone that's not on your particular team, but they may be someone that you need to connect with. For instance, if you're doing an event in the downtown, your public works people are probably going to be listed on how do we shut the streets down? How do we get the trash cans where they need to be? How do we get banners on? Whatever that might be. So there may be people who are not actively on your team every day, but are project piece that you would put in. And guard against overloading any one individual or group when you're looking at that. And when you have all of it spelled out in your action planning, it's pretty easy to see, Sue's name is on everything and there's no way that that's going to work. We have to start sharing the workload. And then the due date should be used to indicate the specific date on which the board, the project manager, the team, the individual will have a task completed. Now, I know, because I've been a local director, that some of those are continuous. You're always going to have some sort of district cleanup. I've seen lots of different cities call it different things, but whether it's downtown cleanup and you go clean up the gardens and you pick up trash, I mean, that's kind of a continuous activity. Most everything else will have very specific due dates on it. And flying by the seat of your pants is not fun. It's rarely exciting, and if you do it all the time, it's not fun at all. So include that planning time. 6 months, especially for events. If you're doing large special events, you got to put some planning time in it. It's just not going to go well for you if you don't. So put that extra planning time in. And then the budget. Make sure you take some time to research and assign that dollar amount to each specific task. If you're having a large special event downtown and you know you're going to have to bring in porta potties, how much are they going to cost? That's a Google search. That's not hard to look and start working that in too, because then the board will be able to look at the overall work plans and start planning the budget as it's attached to each of your action plans. And then no dollars can be expended until the entire group of action plans have been approved. So the way to really look at it is, if say you're on a calendar year, to make it easier for me to explain this to you, probably in September, the board needs to be looking at, okay, we need to have a board retreat. We need to do our goal setting, whatever you call yours, to start the planning for the next year. So the board would set the goals. The goals would go to the teams. The teams would go, okay, this is what we're looking at. So these are the activities that we're going to do. They would send the action plans back to the board, so the board can look at all the action plans at once, look at the budget, make sure that there's not crossover, and if there is, how are we doing that in the best possible way to not exhaust one group and another group basically doing the same thing. They approve the action plans, and then you can get started. But you need about 3 months of planning time on that, because once the board sets the goals, it has to go to the committees, the project teams. They will look at it. They have to put their stuff together and then send it back to the board. So you can kind of see where you really need about 90 days to get that ready to go. So when you start in January, everything is already in play. If you get used to doing it, it's pretty easy to just plug it in. And then your individual task lines may have a follow-up requirement. It may be, okay, we've done looking at the codes and zoning review. We're gonna road trip to this city. And once that is done, we're going to collect theirs, and then this is the next thing that we need to do.
Didn't get that.
So think through that, then report it to the committee, file, and make sure you send those thank you notes. And I talked a little bit about this already. The entire committee should approve the proposed action plans before it's forwarded to the board of directors. So you need to sit down as a group and say, this is what we're going to do, and we agree, and now we're sending it on to the board. And then the board should review all of them at once. So they can look at budget, they can look at and work planning, they can look at the time constraints of your local director, whatever all those things may be, and then the board will approve all of them at once. And then if you have something that additionally needs to be added on during the year, because we live in a world that changes constantly, maybe something came through at the last minute that was not on the radar when you did your action planning, and now you're going, hey, I think we need to do this. It needs to go back to the board. And that happened to me as a fairly new Main Street director. We had completed our work plan, our action plans for the year, and we had the Great American Race, I think is what it was called. It was antique cars that went from one side of the United States to the other. I don't think they do it anymore. Pretty cool event, frankly. And the lunch stop that was scheduled for when they came through Kansas, for whatever reason, canceled. And they came to us with about 6 weeks notice saying, hey, do you think in 4 years we pick this up? So I went to my board, the board goes, you're going to have to look at the other plans because we can't do that and do some of the other things. So promotion team had to go back to the drawing board and look at, okay, what are we willing to let go? Do we want to pick this up? Do we think we can do it? So we dropped 2 activities to pick up the 1 activity, and it was wildly successful, but because the framing was kind of short, there was no way we could do everything that was on the plan. So that was, and then we had to go back to the board to say, okay, this is what we decided, let's move forward. So I'm gonna go through just kind of how an action plan could look for you. So if your overall goal, say, is that the board sets that kind of broad range goal is to market the district's unique characteristics through to shoppers, investors, visitors, through special events in each building and activities and retail events. Clearly, this is promotion. The outcome, we want to change somebody's perception that there's nothing to do, or that our businesses aren't special, or that we don't have other cool things going on. And then we decided to do the Did You Know activity. And so the activities, the things you're going to be doing are, we need to go out and we got to gather those interesting unknown things about those businesses. How are we going to deliver it? Is it going to be social media? Is it going to be newsletter? Is it going to be newspaper? Is it going to be radio? And then how often are we going to do this? Every month? Are we going to do it every week? And how do you select the businesses to highlight? And then how are you measuring the impact? And I already talked to you a little bit about how we did it with Jim's Cowboy Shop. So It is old school, but it still works. When we are working on action planning, it's much easier to go back to kind of the paper where you can scratch it up, write it in, do all your thing. And then if you have something like a Maestro or something like that, that is an electronic version that you can pull it into, then it's maybe easier. In fact, I just talked about this last night in one of our communities. If you have someone who can't really come to meetings but really wants to be involved, and they get the electronic piece, I would do everything via paper, and then I would give it to one person to input if that's their thing. But it's much easier when you do action planning, in my opinion, to use an old school piece of paper and just write it out, scratch it, mark it up. Coffee stains, pizza stains, whatever needs to be on it is completely fine, and then you can put it in a prettier form later. Take some time, make sure that you're working smart when you're doing your action planning. So be very specific. The more nebulous you are in that goal and in your specific action pieces, the less you're going to be able to get things done. So you want this to be very specific. It needs to be measurable, action oriented, make it realistic, and keep it time bound. So some benefits of an action plan are how to motivate those volunteers to achieve a goal. Most volunteers on their kind of motivational, why I'm doing this, why I want to be involved, it's relational, or it's how do I make my community better, or I would like to get my name out there because I'm a salesperson and they don't know me. I mean, these are the kind of things that motivate them. And it's good for you to know that in advance so you can help align your volunteers with what their motivation is. Provides us benchmarks for success. You can say, okay, this is what we're doing. And it will attract donations for specific projects. So a great example of this, when we were putting together our start your own business class, because we had a large vacancy rate, we're going, we got to get some help, we got to get some money in here. We went to a foundation and said, we need some seed money for our businesses that are coming in. And they said, well, okay, well, show me a plan. And it occurred to me, oh, they really just want the work plan. So it was after that was when I was really, light bulb moment. Work plans are great. It'll help attract donations. We took the work plan that had all the stuff on it that we were planning on doing, the Start Your Own Business class, and they did indeed fund it and have continued to fund it for several years up to a certain amount. It improves the success rate of those projects. It reduces that confusion and conflict of, I volunteered and I wanted to do stuff, but now there's nothing for me to do, or I don't understand what we're doing. Having that action plan pulled out really gets that volunteer fired up. It's a great recruitment tool. And it also helps you understand, do you need team volunteers who are coming to every committee meeting, or do you need project people? You may need a whole bunch of people for one event, but they're not the ones that want to come to every meeting. This is a very great way to start pulling that action plan together. And it's a fantastic PR tool. So to talk about the public relations of what the Main Street program is doing is different than marketing and advertising for your events and activities. So the organization committee's job and under PR is to promote the organization, to sell the Main Street organization, where the promotion committee is selling events and activities. Sometimes those two will cross, but the PR piece that you can use from having something like a very robust action plan helps that PR throughout the entire year. So, and then share your work plans. And again, you don't always want to share, the coffee stain, sometimes tear stained, pizza stain, paper plan that you've been just toiling over. Do something more interesting. Like, this is one of my cities in Alabama, Jasper does their 2022 work plan. They do it on phone cord. They do it with their big kickoff event to kick off their year, telling everybody, this is what we're doing in 2022. And then when they started out 2023, they did the exact same thing, but they had these same work plans that said, finished, complete, done, accomplished. So share them, not the physical piece with all the budget stuff on it, but something like this. So the cool thing about management by work plan is that each committee will use their portion of the action plan as their agenda. So from day one, once you get those done, you've got a year's worth of activities. It also, work is accomplished in that chronological order. It helps you plan out your year. The team chairs, committee chairs report to the board, so the board knows monthly how things are going. If you need time to allow for changes or updates, like I mentioned earlier, when the great raise came through and we're going, oh, we're going to have to back up and do some different stuff. It gave us time to do that. It lets the director and the board know immediately if an activity is in trouble, and then allows the board to control the work priorities and time commitments of their director. So the Main Street 4-point approach relating to transformation strategies is really looking at how the 4 points relate to economic development. So when you look at EV, it's build a diverse economic base, catalyzing smart new investment, creating that strong entrepreneurial ecosystem. Then design that inviting, inclusive atmosphere, fostering accessibility. You get down into organization, the leadership, strong organizational capacity, and then promotion, marketing, the defining assets, communicating features through storytelling, buy local. It all ties together to that transformation strategy. So when you're doing that journey, you want to start with having that community vision for the district, something that says, like I was saying earlier about ours, creating jobs and keeping character. It's pretty easy for me to relate what Main Street Alabama does to the state. You need to be thinking of how you're doing that within your district. So you want that vision. Then you need to understand the market. And it's important that from the market study perspective, that if you're trying to be a champagne and caviar city, but your market is beer and burger, you really need to think about that. It is important that you understand what your market is. And then what's the strategy that fits best for you? In a lot of our cities that are closer to the beach here in Birmingham or Alabama, tourism is a very big deal. So it may be tied more toward tourism, or it may be tied more toward one of our cities in North Alabama is very music oriented with the group Alabama and everything that's kind of tied around that whole music piece. What is your transformation strategy, that thread that runs through? That is something that Missouri Main Street will help you with. And then implement that 4-point approach. And then what are the outcomes and the measurements and the impact? So it's a constant cycle that you go through. So in order to figure out what your transformation strategy is, and again, this is something that Gayla and her crew will work with you on, is the community vision and the market data, basing it in economic reality. What's the strategy development? How do you identify and set those goals? How do you develop your measurements of success? And then are the projects aligned to meet up with the board goals as it relates to the transformation strategy? Then partners identified, list of activities, create the action plans, they approve it, they approve the budget, and then you submit it if you need to the municipality. So successful revitalization and community development, it's looking at the programming side of things, but also the organizational. Make sure that you're looking at design, org, promo, and EV across the board as you're developing your plans. And don't get overly stuck in one point. Make sure you're trying to meet something in all four. Some potential strategies for direct downtown revitalization would include health and wellness. That could pull together retail, recreation, educational that tie around wellness and well-being. Convenience goods and services could be another one, a cluster of retail and retail service businesses that fulfill that day-to-day need. Arts, we have a lot of our communities. Montevallo is a fabulous one here in Alabama that's very art oriented. College Town, we have a couple of those too, as well as you, that can make those connections between the business district and the anchor educational institution. Really cool stuff. It really helps to focus what you're doing with your action planning if you understand that potential transformation strategy. So refine it. Transformation strategies and action planning, it can't be the same set of action plans every year. You need to grow, you need to reach a goal, you need to move to the next one. It also helps you understand when you have that kind of 5-year big vision, what do I do in year one to get me one step closer to where I need to go? So it's broad, continuous, serves as guide to decision making. Is this when you are approached, and a lot of times Main Street organizations are approached because they get stuff done. They will be approached to do things that don't fit their strategy. And it gives you that real opportunity to say, this is our focus. So I think it's really great. I like it a lot on the transformation strategy. It serves as a guide to decision making. It helps you organize special, specific annual activities, are cross-cutting. So every committee is working toward the strategy overall within their 4 points. And it helps stimulate that thinking about other partnering organizations that could assist you. So I have some examples of some ones that we've done here in Alabama. This is Anniston, and their strategy was arts and culture. So we really wanted to work with them on how do they create that product and services, and how arts and culture could tie into everything that they're doing. So we had the big community input. We looked at their previous plans, their master, they have one of the best streetscape pop-up shop stuff along the streets that I've seen in the nation. So if you need a pedlet or a parklet plan, I'll send you theirs because it's fabulous. And then how do you put the market data to get that where it needs to go? So this is kind of the mission statement vision that we came up with, is that downtown Anniston is well known for its spirited business community and the support the city provides for those entrepreneurs. Consumers find the downtown district to be a rich experience that truly engages them to honor the history, arts, and culture that make downtown Anniston a unique destination. So some of the things that we talked about that they really wanted to do was to create that sustainable atmosphere that engaged all 5 senses. So when they were looking at events and activities, it's like, what does it sound like? What does it smell like? What does it look like? What is it? Can you touch it? So they looked at those 5 senses. That vibrant destination for businesses, they really wanted to become an entrepreneurial hub, and then celebrating the history and culture that defines the downtown, because it's a very unique cross-cut culture there in Anniston. And here are some different things that we put in there. How do you create that sustainable atmosphere? Well, you got to reduce some vacancies. You need to increase the foot traffic. You need to engage business owners in the downtown district. More customers parking in the downtown. I know parking is the word. You're going, they want more. Yeah, they have a higher vacancy rate. And how each of these ties in: increased clicks on the online directory, increased job growth. So it all tied kind of back to the economic vitality of it. And then it tied back into another one part of what I really like about the transformation strategies is you go your overarching goals, but it also ties back to, does this fit in the 4 points? So it really does help you go, cool idea, maybe not something we need to do. Maybe another organization needs to do it. So part of what they had already in play was SOD and Vibrancy Grant Program, the Noble Street Festival, Fourth Fridays, Neowalla on Noble, and the Christmas Parade. And did that tie into what they were wanting to do? And did it tie into the Main Street 4-point approach? And then we got in a little bit deeper on what does this mean and who takes care of it. So this talks about projects and activities in the first year. Maintain the current property and business inventory, clean up and stage empty storefronts was designed. It was a very important thing. And it still kind of fit within that 5 senses. Conduct walkability audit, facade and vibrancy grant program in progress. Minimum maintenance ordinance, and they have adopted their minimum maintenance ordinance. So you can see where it kind of tied back to, you were thinking arts and culture. Well, before you can do arts and culture, you have to have some minimum maintenance things and image building and storefronts that are filled to start to promote that arts and culture activities. This is Montevallo. I talked about them a little bit earlier. They wanted to I can say this, cultivate an environment for healthy lifestyle options, and also that engaging atmosphere for people of all ages. And then, of course, they wanted to encourage and celebrate growth in the arts. So some of the things that we went through was, what are you currently working on? This is the resource team report when we came in, and what does this mean, and how does that tie back to? And then going into how do we tie that into the Maestro action planning? Now, I'm not a salesperson for Maestro. It's the one we use here in Alabama, but it does really help them figure out the action plan, who's tied to it, looking at building and property inventory, looking at events and activities, and you can even tie in, a person to a property and a property to the person. It's really slick, but there's other programs out there if you wish to use it. So when you develop a good action plan, you need to identify the resource needs, identify the financial strategy, what are the public relation needs, draft the plan, and get your board approval. I know I've been kind of beaten on that for a while, but it's so important that the board is involved in what you're doing. So the board reviews all proposed draft work plans of all teams at the same time. Are the projects realistic? And are they really spelled out? Because again, a lot of times you get a big vision and not a lot of how in the world do I do? How do I get to where we need to be in 5 years? What do we do in year 1? This really starts to break that down. Is there enough money? If the team activities duplicate one another, are the teams working together? Are the activities quantifiable? So if you're a board member and you're looking at this wondering what in the world is my job as a board member for my local program, this is your job. Are the timelines in place? Who's responsible, just to make sure that things run smoothly? It's important that each team receives in-person input from the board. If activities are approved, let them get to work. But if not, you need to let them know why, because these are volunteers who spent some time and energy saying, I really thought this was a cool idea. If it's, hey, this is already being duplicated by somebody else, or we don't have the funding for this, whatever that is, they deserve a response from you as to why it's not being approved. Then all the teams receive a copy of the entire organization's work plans. Something that I always did at the end of each team meeting, I spent the last 5 minutes, if we were doing promotion, talking about, okay, this is what EV has coming up, this is what org has coming up, this is what design has coming up. Because the teams shouldn't be working in silos. You want to make sure that you get them the opportunity to know what the others are doing. And what if you need to make changes? Work plans need to be flexible. They are going to change. Everything changes. Weather might come up. You may have a partner that you thought was going to be helping you with this back out. You got to get a new partner. All kinds of things can happen. So be flexible. New activities can't be added without prior board approval. Money shouldn't be spent without board approval. No fundraising should be taken without the board. So board, you're starting to realize you're that 10,000-foot group that's making sure that things are flowing the way they need to flow. And to add a new activity, you may need to drop one so that you don't overspend or burn out your volunteers. And again, the cool thing is that each team uses their portion as a work plan. For the rest of the year, you're not sitting there in a team meeting going, what are we doing? And everybody goes, I don't know what we're doing. There's absolutely nothing worse than to volunteer and then all you do is rehash what you did at the last meeting. I'm a girl that will sit through 2 of those meetings and then I'm probably going to say, I don't think this is a good fit for me. I want to get things done. So just sitting through a meeting and rehashing what happened 5 years ago or last week is not productive. Use your work plans, move forward. Work is accomplished in chronological order. They report to the board monthly. It allows time for changes. They know something's in trouble, and the board can look at what the executive director's work priorities are. Top 5 reasons to do, the work plans are motivating them to achieve a goal. If people are volunteering, people don't volunteer to do a bad job. They want to get things done. So this is a really great way to get people motivated. It gives that benchmark. You know where you're at. You can say to your funders and your supporters, this is what we said we were going to do. This is where we're at on what we said we're going to do. And next year, this is what we got done. I already told you a little bit about how we were able to attract sponsorships for specific projects on our Start Your Own Business classes. And it was really because of the action planning. We're able to take this saying, this is what we have in play. This is who we're working with. This is where we're going to go. And they go, okay, we're in. It improves that success rate and quality of projects and reduces that confusion and conflict. So I'm just about perfect on my time. Thank you so much for allowing me to beam into you guys and help you with your action planning. Happy to help my Midwest friends whenever you need me to, and thank you for your time. I appreciate it.